the temptation is to give nothing because you can't give what you think you ought to give.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that's completely wrong. Jesus accepts and is delighted when we give him our lousy best. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're here with Human Life International. My name is Francis.
And my name is Claire.
And today we're going to be talking about the Rosary from our perspective as to, well, how would you put our description? What would you put our description as?
A unique description.
A unique description from our unique standpoint as young people, I suppose. Yeah. We'll just go with that. From our unique perspective on the Rosary as young people, as the youth.
Yeah.
We don't claim to be representative of all youth. That would be a little bit arrogant, I think. But we are two youths, and we're going to talk about the Rosary today. So, Claire, what did the Rosary mean growing up?
Yeah, I was giving this some thought the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was trying to force an answer that people would want to hear.
Right, yeah.
But really, like, my first memory of the Rosary was just pain. Like, it wasn't something I was entirely, like, attracted to praying. I think there was a desire to like it and maybe a need to to do it for my parents, to pray the Rosary with them. And thankfully brought up in a Catholic home where the Rosary was prayed every now and then, not consistently, but I think it was just so long. It was just so long as a child, where I could have been doing other things or pretending to sleep on the way home in the car. When Mum would pull out the Rosary beads, you'd hear them and then you're like, I'm asleep at the back, which is so bad. But I think it's the understanding that it wasn't perfect from the word go. Like, it wasn't. What's your first memory of, like, the Rosary as a child?
First memory, I probably couldn't tell you. Maybe if I had a while to think about that, I could come up with something for you. But like growing up, prayer as a family in general, I didn't love, to be honest. Sort of sounds somewhat similar, I suppose. I never had a problem with it. I just sort of did it because our family did it, and I was part of our family, and that's what we did. And so I would do it, and I would pray it, and there are definitely nights that, yes, the same thing. I'm asleep, Mom. Leave me alone. I'm asleep. And she's like, "You're not asleep. You're telling me you're asleep." But then that changed for me when I was 18 or so. So it went on a while. Like, it went on a long while, and it was the prayer expression of our family, and thus it was my prayer expression because I was still very much part of my family as opposed to fully my own individual at that point. I was starting to come into it. Obviously, I was 18, but the whole, from a prayer perspective and from a prayer life perspective, yeah, prayer was still very much something that was a family event. And so then my dad invited me to do Exodus 90, which, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a 90-day program of prayer, asceticism, and fraternity. So you give things up, you take on a heap of stuff, and then you do it in the context of brotherhood with a group of men. And so you take out stuff that isn't necessarily bad, but it's really not helping you. So, like, there's no TV, you don't watch sport, you don't drink alcohol, you don't eat desserts, things like that. And then you put in a bunch of stuff. So you do cold showers, you do fasting, you do an extra mass every week than you would normally. And then there's there's different, so that's the asceticism. And then the prayer is a bunch of other prayer things that you take on. So you have to do a daily holy hour, and then there's different readings from the book of Exodus. So that's a very short synopsis of Exodus, but of Exodus 90. But that changed my life, basically. And the hour, the daily holy hour, that forced me to pray in my own right. And so that, as I say, changed my life. And so that's where the turning point was for me. And so prayer, it changed my life in terms of, well, in lots of ways, but very predominantly, I would say, in giving me an active prayer life, and the Rosary was part of that. And so I started to sort of click on to the Rosary a bit, and I was like, okay, well, like, what's this about? And I started to sort of grow in relationship with the Blessed Mother, and um, realize the value of the Rosary and what it could do in terms of being a powerful prayer, and then also what it could do in terms of actually helping me, and then also making me grow. And so we could get into that, the whole thing of like the benefits of the Rosary. But that was my turning point, I would say. What would yours have been?
I would say it's really been in the last 2 years as well, because I think up until then I had this understanding of what the Rosary was, and maybe how it looked. And I think from what I'm hearing from you was that it was definitely around the family, which is great. Thank God for that. But it just, I think we have a desire to, like, our parents tell us what to do, and it's like, I will not do that. And I felt like that was something that it took me so long to, like, that battle of like struggling with what is the interpretation of the Rosary for me, rather than being told what to do. And that sounds really stubborn, but I think I do have fond memories of it as a child. But I think like a really cool memory that I have was just years of maybe trying to avoid prayer time with the family, because I thought, I'm becoming, like, I'm an adult, like I got
I
this.
don't pray anymore.
Yeah, like, or even like if I do pray, it's like I'll be the judge of when that happens.
Right, yeah.
And I remember coming up the stairs, and there would be like a glow from mom and dad's bedroom, just a little bit of light, and there was an altar, or ladies' altar, in mom and dad's room, and mom was praying the Rosary, and she consistently every night prayed the Rosary. And there was like a desire to go in there, but at the same time there was just a pull away from it, to be like, that seems very rigid. It seems as though I need to figure it out for myself, and I need it to be a little bit more independent than just latching on to maybe an understanding that mom and dad had. And so there was that craving, that want to pray it, but it was really only in the last few years, whenever I became a missionary, and I was around people my age, and I had been praying the Rosary, but I didn't love it.
Because you went to Craig Lodge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in Scotland, right?
Yeah, and we had 2 rosaries a day, timetabled into our schedule, and you start to come together and you pray together, and you hit that time at 5 o'clock in the evening, and everybody's exhausted, and you can start to hear people like drifting off in the Hail Mary, and it just becomes, I don't know, it became something of my own. It became like a unique prayer time for me. And then the desire came in, where even when we were off and we had our own free time as missionaries, I would be like, I need to get my Rosary said today. And I think that was going on for a few months before I realized, whoa, where was the change in there? And I think there was just so long I prayed it without having a great desire for it. And I think our Lord hears our prayers. Like, God hears our prayers, and that craving just grew. And now there's a hunger to pray it. There's, especially, I don't know, I love praying it in the car. It's me and the Lord. It's my time. And now as a family we would pray it together. And yet I've gone off and I've found out the understanding of the Rosary, like what it means to me. And now I can come back and pray it with people having gone through that. Because like I shared with you before this, it's a strong word, but I hated praying the Rosary as a kid. I just thought, no, not today. Like, I'm not doing it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's I'm grateful at the same time that it was still something that I seen as a kid. It's something that I remember making an altar to Our Lady every May, and that was just something that I loved to do. We did it in primary school, but it was like the month of May we'd maybe come together and pray, and then that was it. Maybe sparsely every few weeks. But yeah, I think it's just something you have to figure out for yourself, and it just looks different to people. This desire, people might think that, oh, I have to do it a certain way. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
I've on doing it a certain way.
Yeah.
Well, there's a story that my mom likes to tell about. Well, it's sort of her own journey with the family Rosary, particularly, because my dad's family, when they were growing up, they did the Rosary every night, and so my family now does the Rosary every night because Dad brought that from his family into, or from his the family he grew up in, into his own family with mom, and he brought that into our family. Um, and so it, particularly when we were a younger family, we're starting to get older now. We still have young ones. The youngest is still Elizabeth's. I think she's nearly 2 or nearly 3. That's something I should know. But anyway, so the point is, like, we're still a young family, but when we were all young, the rosary was just a mess. And you've been there at the rosary.
Yeah.
It's still not a polished final product. But there'd just be children climbing and children crying and
I
children.
come to your house late in the evening so that we can
Yeah,
pray the rosary
yeah.
together. It's chaotic,
It
but it's
is.
fun.
It is. But so it's chaotic now, but it was, believe it or not, worse before. And so mom would see this. She would see the rosary that we were doing as a family, and then we'd be off at different other families, and they would, very, very prayerful, sort of peaceful, tranquil setting, and a great sort of, you know, a posture of prayerfulness, and everyone would be kneeling of their own volition, kind of thing. And maybe this family over here does their last decade in Latin, and this family over here does this and that. And then she would see that, and she would just compare. She would compare our rosary to their rosary, and in that comparison, in her mind, our rosary was coming out by far the lesser version. And something that and so that used to get her down quite a lot. And then something that she realized was that that's their rosary and this is our rosary, and their rosary is beautiful. And that, I don't mean, and it is beautiful. In fairness, that's not what I'm saying. Like, it genuinely is, and it is prayerful. You might even say more prayerful, and it is more peaceful, and it is more. Um, well, I said more prayerful there. Be careful of how you define that. It's not more of a prayer, more, but yeah, more peaceful, more what you might consider the rosary should be, I suppose, in comparison to what our rosary was. But what she came to realize was that no rosary is worth more than the other, because that's their rosary and this is our rosary. And the fact that we're both doing the rosary is that's sort of the prayer in itself, the fact that we're both doing the prayer. And so she came to realize that because this was our family, and this was our family doing the rosary, and that was our expression of the rosary, and it actually had its own beauty inherent in itself, and it didn't have to be perfect for it to be worthwhile. I think that's basically what I'm getting at. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to match up to whatever you have set as the bar of perfection for it to be worthwhile. And that bar of perfection also, in many cases, probably ought to be reevaluated. Mom certainly did. She realized that she had to. I think I can tell this story. She tells it herself, but she had to sort of reevaluate what it meant for a rosary to be a success before she could feel at all good about the fact that we were doing, or not about the fact that we were doing the rosary, but about the rosaries that we were doing. And once she did that, she started to find joy in these chaotic, ridiculous scream fest rosaries. It ties into, I was at a U2000 retreat. You were there actually as well, on Loch Derg there recently, and there's a priest, Father Columba Jordan. He's one of the CFR Grey Friars. And he and I were talking, and he was talking to me about this notion, or this, it's not a notion, it's more than a notion. It's a kind of a teaching that he has on what he calls the lousy best. So you give God your lousy best, and the temptation, and this, it sort of was what I was already saying, but the temptation is to give nothing because you can't give what you think you ought to give. And he was saying that's completely wrong. Jesus accepts and is delighted when we give him our lousy best. And we still have to try to become better at what we're giving. And if we're aware that something's lousy, if it's lousy, that's not a good thing. And so that needs to be worked on and made better. But the fact that it is our best, it's giving our best to God. And what best is right now is not as important as it is giving the best. So if you work as hard as you can to get a rosary in the day, and the rosary that you end up praying sort of sucks and you don't really like it, and you would prefer to not be doing it, and you're doing it out of a sense of a sense of compunction, or you promised Our Lady that you would pray out the rosary every day for the next 2 weeks, or you're doing it out of a sense of that I have to, or blah blah blah, the list goes on, but it's your best, the rosary that you do is your best, well then that's fantastic. That's all that heaven wants, is your best. And again, if the best is not what you would conceive as being perfect, well, that's fine. That doesn't actually matter as long as you're still giving your best. And if your best is still low, but you don't even give that best, and your rosary is truly dismal, like more dismal than it, like even more dismal than the dismal lousy best, because you didn't try to make it your best, that's not so good. You could improve on that,
Yeah.
even if you're only making it a little less dismal. But if you get it to that point that is still dismal and still kind of low and still kind of hard and still kind of sloppy, and you fell asleep in the middle of the third decade and you woke up and you didn't really know what decade you were on anymore, and so you kind of guessed and you just jumped back in and finally got to the end, and that's your best, great, well done. The rosary was worthwhile.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was. I can't remember what your original question was, to be
You
honest, but
you mentioned about Father Columba, and I
yeah.
love that you mentioned that, because a few months ago I had a very similar conversation with one of my well, actually with a few of the missionaries, and we were talking about, like, in the sense of like worship, and giving the Lord everything, and it's this in giving Him, what is it, our poor offering, and we like hold back in order to like perfect it and give Him what we know He deserves. But it's absolutely what you're saying there, is He actually just wants you to come and pray with Him, be with Him.
Is it sort of, are you saying like we hold back because we have this idea of what we ought to?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it's like we're waiting to give Him perfection, which is obviously what He deserves, but we're human, and we can, and He's like, I just want you.
Mm-hmm.
So like that idea of falling asleep during the rosary, like that happened not that long ago. And I woke up and I was like, well, at least I'm still holding on to where I left off. And I realized that He was just like, I don't really care that you haven't got it all perfect. It's not this idea of having like a performance-based mentality of performing for Him, or making it perfection. He's like, you're my little child, just like come and be with me. And I feel like that's the rosary, has just been that invitation daily to like check back in with the Lord, check back in with Our Lady, call upon her intercession in our day. And I used to get it, so like I felt that I was aiming for the right thing, but it, like, prayer had to look a certain way, and you had to have it structured, and it had to like be perfect and look good. But now it's like so much has been broken off of that, where you get this more organic prayer time, and he sees all the times where you just like show up. You're like, Lord, I don't have it today, I don't feel like I have it, but I'm calling upon like your mother's intercession, because I need her. And we're needy, we're so needy, and people feel it, like, I know I've talked to young people that have said this, that I can't be needy, like I can't be needy for anybody or for anything, but God desires us to be needy for Him. And so when we pray the rosary, I feel like that's that daily invitation to be like, Lord, I don't have what it takes, and I need help. I need our Heavenly Mother to come and help me out in this day. So that that conversation you had with Father Columba, it's really interesting, because we're not called to give the best, like perfection. We're called to give like whatever we have, and that is our best.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's really cool like that.
Go back a second. You were saying there to, I think you used the word posturing. May not have been the word posturing, but like sort of putting up a show of the best that we could for God. You can't do that if you want to get to know God better. Because imagine you do that with another human being. You're trying to, and somebody, because we want to get to know God better, we want to draw closer to God, but just swap it away from God into the context of another human relationship for a second. If you're trying to get to know another human better, you shouldn't put up a facade. You shouldn't have this show of perfection, because what's going to happen is that person's going to get to know your facade better. They're not going to get to know you better. You might even draw further away from the person if the facade that you're putting up is quite far removed from the actual you. And so if you swap that back into the context of the relationship with God, it's different, obviously, to a human relationship in so many ways, but one of the biggest ones is the fact that you can't hide from Him anyway. It's not like trying to put up a show of perfection. Even if you manage to put up a show of perfection, is going to fool Him in the first place. You can feel it. You can fool a human that way, but you can't fool God that way. And so the very reason for which you're putting up that facade of perfection to God in the first place is null and void, because it doesn't attain its objective of fooling the person. God,
Because he knows
he knows
anyways.
exactly, yeah. So it first of all doesn't obtain its objective,
Mm.
and the objective was kind of bad to begin with. And also it doesn't bring you any closer to God. That's not true. It's still better to pray than to not pray, but it doesn't bring you as close as you could if you would just show him like where you're really at. Like you were kind of saying there, like this, it kind of sucks, Lord. It's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I haven't done the rosary that I
Yeah.
promised I was going to do today, and my eyelids are already closing by themselves. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, but like you said, I'm
Yeah.
still here. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
gonna
showing
do it.
up.
I'm showing up.
Yeah.
That is about as far as I feel that
Yeah.
I can get to. So you're gonna have to help me to get the rest of
Yeah.
the way to the end of the 5 decades. But like, and you will, by the way. Like, you ask for grace, you get it. It's like, if you show up, that's it's like it's a two-part, a two-way. Be careful of the words I use. I was going to say successful prayer is like a two-way thing. I don't quite know how to articulate it, but like, you have to show up, but also God does his part, and
Yeah.
you can't
Lots of
expect him
grace.
to do it all. Like, you still have to. It's like, yeah, I don't really. A great analogy. This would be a great place for a decent analogy, but I can't think of one. Like trusting God in something, like, or God's will, like knowing what God's will is. You can't just sit there and wait for him to give it all to you.
There has to be an active
There has to be an
participation.
act, exactly. There has to be an act on your part, and so the showing up for the prayer, if that's going back to the lousy best thing, if just showing up is as far as you can get by yourself, then show up and do everything you can to show up, and then he'll take it from there and give you the grace to take it from there in the next step after the showing up. And you weren't able to take that step, but he helps, and then you can, and bada bing, bada boom, you're at the end of the 5 decades and you can go to sleep.
Yeah.
So.
I just think it's really cool hearing like two different stories, and I've talked to loads of young people about like what prayer life looked like in their house growing up, and you think maybe, well, if I had had it this way, things might have been different, or I could even understand the desire for parents to lead prayer in their home a certain way, and because then obviously that'll lead to a greater success of like our children's prayer life or whatever, but it's never meant to look the same for everybody.
No, and it also can't be successful in the same. Well, basically what you're saying, but yeah, this exactly the same thing isn't going to have exactly the same result iterated across time.
He's so intentional with how he takes you on your own journey, like your journey with him, and that's where it leads back to what you're saying about if we try to be anything else. Like, he knows what's going on. He's
better
just
than
like,
we do.
Why don't you just tell me what I already know? But at least I'm giving you the free will to like lay it down before me, and that's why, we have that free will to give God everything that we have, or to hold back from him. And we're only really going to suffer if we hold back.
Exactly,
because he already knows.
He already knows. What you were just saying there about he already knows, but he gives us the choice or the option to open up to him. He's not going to barge his way in. If you're closed off and you've got this facade of perfection up, he's not going to smash it away to like get at you and force you to get to know him better and force you to come closer to him. He already knows what's going on, as you say, but it takes us opening up to him before he's able to come in one sense. And he's God, he's able to do all things, of course, but before he will come in, I guess you could put it that way. Like, he's not going to force his way in. It takes the opening up to allow him in. And once you allow him in, well, then he's delighted, and then things just kind of take off from there. But it's just, you have to open up, basically, if he's going to come in.
And I think it's just to encourage anybody that is thinking like prayer should look a certain way, that he has a beautiful plan, and you just got to hold tight. You just got to keep showing up, like bring that prayer offering, bring him everything that you have, because he already knows. He's inviting you, he's giving you that invitation to walk towards him, to choose him. And like, our lives are so different. We've had very different understandings of prayer life and the rosary, but it's like his timing is so good, And thank God, thank God, because he's been so good in my life. But he's definitely allowed things to go a certain way so that I can choose him. Like I get the opportunity to choose him in my timing, because then he can do so much more rather than feeling like it's forced upon me. Because it, like the rosary felt like it was forced upon me as a child. But sorry, mum and dad.
Well, it was.
That's what it felt like.
It was the same thing for us. Like it was non-negotiable. You don't get to not do the rosary in our house, basically. Like it's not like you can just plead off because you don't want to be there. And so I do like home is a prayerful place because of that sort of. And like you could definitely see, like you kind of touched on it yourself, how you were kind of put off because it was, you wanted to do your own kind of prayer and you wanted prayer to be your own thing. And so that could happen, of course, but I owe a lot, I think, to the fact that the rosary was so vital or so integral to our upbringing. And then something else I would say was, thought of it just there, but it's gone. No, it's gone. Never mind.
Do you know, I was thinking about there was just the impact that both our mums have had on our own prayer life, and it's to encourage, like, even mums, the power of a mother's prayer. I really felt that very strongly when I was thinking about the impact that the rosary has had, and it's that witness to seeing my mum, because yeah, I feel like she would be happy for me to share this. But I think she did carry the prayer in our family for quite some time, and even I could see then Dad had, like, his heart got pierced as well, and I believe it was the power of her prayer, consistently praying when nobody was praying with her. And now, like every night, my mum and dad pray, whether I'm coming or going or with them or not, or
That's
in the
class.
house. And it's amazing how even now I see them both pray it together, and they're a solid front. They're a real strong witness. But it took time. Oh, did it take time? But it was those early days of just mum, like, quietly praying, where she wasn't doing it to show it to anybody. And I feel like that's your mum too.
It is.
Like,
yeah,
just sort of the strong woman.
gritting it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Holding
last
on
thing,
to a child.
I remembered what I was going to say. It ties in quite well to all of that. It's that we've talked a lot about just showing up and the lousy best, and how things, if it's poor, give it anyway, and all of that. And that's kind of been the theme of our conversation today. But just a final thing on that, there are times when it's not like that. There are times when it's really easy. When it's just like, oh God, this is class. Can I do another one?
Yeah.
Is that okay? And that's great. But where do you think that the most hard yards in growth and grace and virtue come from? Like when you do something because it's really easy and you enjoy it, in this case prayer, well, that's not going to do as much. You can just take one metric like character formation or spiritual character formation, whatever the actual term for that might be. That's not going to do as much for you in that respect as it will when you show up and you do the same prayer when your motivation to do so and your enjoyment of the process is down here. When it's up here and life's great and everything's sunshine and unicorns and you're having a blast and God's just like yay and you're just like yay, and it's all just, and it's very close, and you feel close to God, I guess, when it feels good.
Consolation
Exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it feels good and you do the same thing, and it doesn't feel good and you do the same thing, what's of more value to you in? That's a question. That's not a question for you, obviously. But in the context of the conversation, what's going to be of more value in making you into someone who is a greater warrior for God, basically?
Yeah.
And the answer is self-evident, but we're gonna still have them think it out for themselves. That brings us to the end, Claire. For anybody who wants to ask questions or comment or say anything or do all the other things that they say on YouTube, I can't remember the spiel exactly, but it's comment at letstalk.com. I have it here.
.show.
Comment at letstalk.show. That's an email address. So you can email your comments or your questions or your whatever else's you might want to send. to that email address. That once again is comment@letstalk.show. This has been Human Life International's podcast. My name is Francis.
And my name is Claire.
And we'll see you again next time.
God bless.
That.